So I'll just do a quick introduction and welcome to everybody. It's 8 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us. We're in, some of us are in the middle of week 4, some of us in the middle of week 5, and some of us are in the middle of week 6 of our lockdown. So thank you, whatever stage of lockdown you're at. As you may know, because of the impact of the COVID-19, the team here at Action Duchenne have been constantly considering how we can best use our resources to really positively help and support the community throughout this really difficult time. So we have arranged these webinars. We've got 6 consecutive fortnights with the lovely Marion. We also have a session for adult physiotherapy and older young people with Marina DeMarco as well from Scotland. We also have a relax and chill session with a relaxation coach, and there will be more to come as well. So really just sign up to as many as you would like to take part in. There's no limit. It's open for everybody and it's all free, provided by ourselves, Action Duchenne. So we will be recording today. Please, sorry, I'm just put off. There's a few little pop-ups in my ear. If you can't see Marion, please look to her name and actually just pin her to your screen, and you'll be able to see her all the way through. So please write your questions in the text box, and we will make sure that we can ask them to Marion, or obviously Marion can see them herself as well. We're also going to be muting everybody to avoid the background noise. We have been using Hangouts because it is free, but obviously with a bit of feedback, we may actually move over to Zoom depending on what the cost is. But we'll see what your feedback is, you guys, from the feedback forms, which leads me on. I will be sending out some feedback forms tomorrow morning, so please let me know your thoughts. But without further ado, I am absolutely delighted to welcome friend of Action Duchenne, long-time member and adored member of the Duchenne community. Marion does so much for families over the, decades that you've been in the community. Marion is the Senior Physiotherapist at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and we are absolutely delighted to bring her into your homes this evening. So Marion, I'm going to leave it over to you, and please shout if you need any assistance at any time.
Lovely. Thank you, Lynette and Sam, for doing all the work tonight. Good evening, everybody who's in lockdown. I'm not in lockdown only because I'm still working. So I am trotting into Great Ormond Street every so often just to check what's going on and to actually see some children. But obviously in lockdown, there are 2 problems. The first one is how long it's going to be. This is going to be a big problem, and we're going to talk about that. And the second one is access to your own physios. And I know a lot of parents have said to us that they can get hold of their physio, but they can't see them. Their physio can't see them. Some of you are managing to get video consultations, something similar to this, but some of you are not. And that's why we need to get together and sort out any difficulties. But tonight we're going to talk about exercise, and the biggest problem we have is the length of time that lockdown is going to last. As Lynette said, I have been doing this a long, long time, 30 years, and we have always found that the period from September to December has been the hardest for the boys who are struggling with their mobility. And why it's that period of time is that school holidays do cause problems. I don't think people always realize how busy you are during a school week. You have to get to school, you have to get home from school, you have to cope with break times, with lunch times, PE, after school activities, swimming, clubs, whatever you get up to. Now, obviously, there are children who aren't very active. There are parents who aren't very active, and we're going to talk about them too. But the important thing to realize is just how much less activity you are doing during this lockdown time. And if this is going to last from now till September, we really need to think about getting you into a routine of doing what you would do in a school day. Admittedly, there are younger children who are not of school age, and they're not so much of a problem, only because the youngest of children, the under fives, don't really need prompting to do activity. Very often, the biggest problem parents have with the under fives is keeping them still. Interestingly, while boys with Duchenne muscular dystrophy have reduced power, they don't always have, at a young age, reduced stamina. And very often with the young children, they can keep going forever, just can't generate power to do the things like get up from the floor, get upstairs, jump and hop. Now, obviously steroids makes a difference, but when you are on steroids and you're not active, that can add to the problem, because steroids, we know, not all of them boys, but several of the boys will put on extra weight merely by being on steroids. And we need to burn that weight off. So tonight we're going to talk about exercise, but if you are one of our boys, i.e. a Great Ormond Street boy, you will know that generally we don't like exercise. And the reason I say that is because all those parents who don't go to the gym, even though you may have gym membership, you will know that standing on a treadmill, doing routine exercise, doing the same thing day in, day out, exercise programs are intolerably boring. And that is why some of the people who were on early have already seen some of my equipment that we use to do exercises is not really exercise equipment at all. I do have the boring stuff, like a foam roller that everybody knows, like a therapy ball, which I don't have here. But generally what we prefer to look at for our children, and it's not just DMD, for all our children, is not exercise programs, it's play, activity, sport, fun. Play is the exercise of children, but it has to be active play. It is very tempting to spend a lot of time, and that's parents as well, and this is the killer, because you don't want to give up the Xbox either, or your iPad, or your phone. So you're sitting there trying to persuade the children to be active. It's not going to work. It's great when you're on holiday, great when you're busy, but spending a lot of time in lockdown actually means that you're going to have to get up off your butts too, because it's the only way you're going to persuade the kids to do it. Get the board games out. Don't play on the iPad. Get the cards out. We will talk about that. Get the balls out, even if it means quick shufty through Amazon where you have to add a little bit of extra. That is fine. A lot of my stuff is stuff I find around the house. It's stuff I pick up in Poundland, the local cheapy shops. There are all sorts of things that you can do at home to make games and exercise fun. How much exercise? All the documents you will read will go somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes of aerobic exercise per day. 30 minutes, we're not talking continuous here, but 30 minutes is actually not that long in a school day. If you have 2 20-minute breaks and an hour at lunchtime, you've already covered a lot of your 60 minutes. But at home, 60 minutes might seem a lot longer. And what are we talking in terms of, say, steps? Strangely enough, and the teenage boys will love this, that actually normal studies show that teenagers generally do a lot less steps than primary school children. The primary school children on the whole are much more active than their teenage counterparts. And that primary school children, boys on average, do 13,000 to 15,000 steps a day in the normal situation. And that reduces to 8,000 to 9,000 in teenagers. So strangely enough, teenagers are not more active. Now, obviously, if you do after school clubs, if you play football, if you do martial arts, all sorts of things, your activity and step count will go up. But we're talking about the average young man, primary school is 13 to 15,000. That's a lot of steps. There are many, many parents who do not achieve that and who only set their step monitors to beep or clap or explode when they've done 10,000. And that seems a reasonable number of daily steps for most people. So as you can see, children under 11 in the normal situation would do quite a lot more than that. So how many would we say is a reasonable number of steps that the boys should be doing? If you have step monitors, if you have Apple Watches, if you have Fitbits, if you have step counters on your phone, we would say that the minimum that ambulant boys should be attempting to do, unless they are struggling, is around 5,000 steps a day. And if we can get to this target for the boys in a general situation, and I'm not talking about go out and walk 5,000 steps, I am talking about a daily step count. So it can be in bits. It doesn't, nobody does their 10,000 all at once unless they go out and run 10K. So even parents, you need to up those daily step counts. It's probably in lockdown you're finding it difficult. Everybody has seen Major Tom on the internet doing his millions of steps, so we can all do it. But steps by themselves are boring. So what are we going to do about it? We have to think how we're going to make these steps more interesting. Let's go back to the beginning, because what I want to do is we'll talk about legs and steps and activity later. But the only way we're going to make this reasonable is to do it in a more formal way. So what I really want to start is start at the top and work down to the feet, head to foot, include the arms on the way down so that we don't miss anything out. So we'll come back to steps later. At this point, I'm going to ask Lynn and Sam, have any questions come in yet? Any questions?
So just at the moment, we've had a few issues with joining the video, but no questions as yet. But I will give you a shout at the next pause if there are.
Okay, so we're going to start with the head, the neck, the shoulders. And the reason that we're doing that is some of the older boys, particularly the 9 to 15-year-olds, will be getting weaker around the head, the neck, and the shoulders. And we have to think about what we're doing with these. Now, we know a lot of the boys, when they're lying on their back, cannot lift their head up. This is not about attempting to do that or making it a useful thing to do. If you have to roll onto the side to get your head up, if you have to roll onto your tummy to get your head up, that is not a problem. That is what you do. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about with head and neck exercises is actually making sure that you don't lose movement. Now, why would you lose movement in your head and your neck? And the reason is because as we slow down, we tend to prop our head a little bit on our shoulders, and we tend to get a little bit hunched, and we don't tend to move quite as much because the head is a heavy object. Now, we know the head's a heavy object if you've ever bumped it or gone flying, crashed into something, and usually whatever it is, although you will get a bump, the other thing comes off worse. So we know the head's heavy. But because it's heavy, we actually strangely use it a lot to balance. And we know that the boys will start using their head to balance. And if it's better to balance one way, then we end up a little bit skew-if. And the problem with skew-if is that everything is skew-if together. Now, if I spend a lot of time like this, and somebody says to me, put your head straight, I will think, what are you talking about? This is straight. Surely this is straight. Same with your spine. If you're always leaning over one bum cheek and somebody says you're not sitting straight, your physio, your parent, your teacher at school, your OT says you're not sitting straight, as far as you're concerned, that's straight. Sometimes what you have to remember is that just because somebody doesn't look straight to you, they may feel straight to them. And that's where heads come in. So that if we're tending to use our head to balance, use our head to keep ourselves in line as we see it, then we need to work on that head. And it doesn't take a lot of persuasion for our 11 to 15-year-olds to look in the mirror. I don't care what they say about girls, boys are much more vain. And while boys may say they don't look in the mirror, this is what selfies are all about. Shop windows, which you can't see at the moment. Anywhere you can, you will get a quick glimpse, bit flick of the hair, whatever you're going to do. So if you want somebody to work on their head, you need to do it in the mirror, and you need to do it, you can play games. Now, we know that you've got to socially distance from people who don't live with you, but you don't have to do it from people who do live with you. And there is the game where you have to pass an orange or something similar. It doesn't have to be an orange, it could be a soft toy, from under your chin to under somebody else's chin without dropping it. And there's all sorts of games you can play that actually involve your head. Now, the other thing that you can see, and you may not want to go out and buy one, but that's when mum has to unfortunately get the sewing box out. I shouldn't say it, but possibly a pair of underwear. And you have those games where you have a cap on your head with Velcro, and you have to catch balls by catching the Velcro on your head. This is a really lovely game for spine mobility, for neck mobility. It's a good way of playing games. The only problem I find with that sort of thing where you have Velcro is the Velcro normally sticks pretty hard, and then it's quite difficult to get them off again. Make sure that if you've got relatively long hair, you don't get them stuck in your hair, because that's no fun either. But there's all sorts of things you can do to actually get that head moving. And people forget about their head in the same way they forget about shoulders. But we will come back to that in a minute, because what I want to move on to from heads is then breathing exercises. Now, you may think that you don't need breathing exercises when you're young. But if, while you are in lockdown, you are no longer swimming, what you will forget is that a lot of what the benefits of swimming involve the breathing and breath control that goes with swimming. When you are in the water, you actually tend to breathe a lot more and breathe against the weight of the water. You have good control breathing. You want to hold your breath if you're going under the water. So generally when you're swimming, there's a lot of breathing work going on that you don't even realize. So if you're not swimming, and this is for parents mostly, if you haven't been swimming for a long time and you try swimming underwater, you will not be able to swim as far as you possibly could previously. And that's because you get out of the habit, and that's breath. And so we need to look at breathing exercises and breathing games as well. This is where a good old-fashioned straw comes in, but as straws are not considered to be eco-friendly these days, I'm just retrieving mine, which is actually in my coffee at the moment. But what we have a lot of these days is the silicone straws. And I'm sure quite a lot of you actually have silicone straws at home. And if you don't, again, it's quite a good investment. They're washable. They usually come in a pack with a little brush. You can wash them out in lots of rainbow colors. And what we can do is play games that involve a straw. Now, you don't need any special equipment, cotton wool balls, makeup remover pads, all sorts of things. You can pick them up, you can put them into other equipment, you can have racers. The gardeners among you will know what that is. That's one of those little seedy things. That's got 12 nice holes. You can use that for quite a lot of things, actually. And then you can have racers to see who can get 12 cotton wool balls, one into each of the holes, using a straw. And that's inspiration. That's sucking, not necessarily deep breath in. So that's an inspiratory activity. And you can do blowing out ones in as much as you can use cotton wool balls. I do have a ping pong ball somewhere. And you can get a situation, you can use boxes with 2 little goals cut out. So you can get a big cardboard box, trim the ends down, cut out 2 goals and play blow football. Come on, you all know what blow football is. So there are plenty of blowing games you can do. And of course, where would we be without the obligatory pot of bubbles? See who can blow the biggest bubble. Really not rocket science to think about how you can do blowing games as well. But we forget that when you're not swimming, you will reduce your breathing exercise. Don't forget your breathing exercises. You can do other things for breathing, and one of the best things you can do for breathing is singing. We know that we have seen on the internet several people videoing themselves, parents and children, doing these lovely songs on the internet. But singing is a brilliant way of expanding those lungs. So if you've got an old karaoke machine or you've got a musical instrument and you can all get that out, brilliant way of doing respiratory exercise. And talking of musical instruments, I have one here. I am not going to play it. This is actually my daughter's. I never was any good on the recorder. It's not a pleasant instrument, to be honest. She has a more impressive one called a Melodica. If any of you remember what a Melodica is, it's like a cross between a piano and a recorder, which is much nicer, and it's also a lovely thing to play. But lightweight things like little whistles, like recorders, like kazoos are another way of getting a good breathing exercise. The other thing, of course, is a harmonica, because you have to suck and blow. So another way of doing your breathing exercises and getting some air into those lungs, particularly if the weather changes and we're all truly stuck indoors, then we need to get those breathing exercises going. So we've got to the head and we've got to the breathing, and now we have to think about what exercise. There are different types of exercise, the good, the bad, and the downright not necessary. And generally, the sort of exercise we're talking about that we should be doing is the aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise is 3 things. Increase in temperature, not to the point of absolutely boiling hot, but a little sweaty. Increase in heart rate. Again, it's not boom, boom, boom. It's a little increase in heart rate. This is why we all have heart rate monitors. It's not necessary for the kids. You don't need to measure their heart rate. And an increase in respiratory rate. And again, you shouldn't be puffed out, but you should have to breathe a little bit more when you've done some reasonable exercise. That is aerobic exercise, and that's what we want to achieve if we're moving the whole body. Again, one of the issues we have with swimming is you don't always see the increase in temperature, the increase in respiratory rate, and so swimming can be more activity than you think, and that can be positive as well as negative. It can cause some fatigue, not the biggest problem in DMD, but sometimes we don't know how tiring swimming can be because we don't see the effects. But those are the main things we want out of exercise: to increase our heart rate, gets the blood flowing, increase our respiratory rate, open those lungs up. And generally, because our blood is flowing a little bit faster and getting to those tissues, we should be warming up a bit. The temperatures have been a bit warm, so you may want to keep the more heavy aerobic exercise till the cooler times of day. It's not great fun. For those of you who have hot tubs or paddling pools, obviously these are great places to exercise. So we've been going nearly half an hour. Any questions coming in?
We have got some questions, Marion. Firstly, I'm very excited that singing is the best thing, so that's I'll be pushing that. So we had the first thing was I can't get my lad off his Xbox, which is, I think, something that lots of people have problems with. And I know you're talking about generally the general exercise. So I wonder if you've got any amazing techniques to help.
Well, actually, I have to be honest and say I have a 25-year-old, and it's jolly difficult to get him off his Xbox. Okay. So I am not unaware of the problem. I think, though, that considering we are probably for most people in Easter school holidays, but we are supposed to be trying to live as normal a life as possible, so that we would be at school, we would be in a more formal program. I think it is very difficult, but very dangerous of parents not to try and enforce a timetable on the children, at least Monday to Friday, otherwise getting back to school in whenever it is, be it June, July or September, is going to be incredibly difficult. We know that 6 weeks in the summer, it's bad enough going back in September. And yes, these kids are going to want to see their friends. Yes, they're going to want to get sociable, but actually getting into routine of school will be incredibly difficult if we don't enforce some sort of routine now. These are supposed to be school days. And it's really important that we try and structure our days, build in the Xbox to it, but actually then have periods when we're absolutely well away from it, when we would normally be at school. And perhaps the way to do this is to say, right, 9 till 4 is school time, and then the rest is Xbox time. But unfortunately, we have to, once you have lost a child, once you have allowed them that freedom, it is very difficult to get it back. There are children who are not as active as others, but parents, if you want them off, you're going to have to lead by example. You're going to have to get more active. You're going to have to find interesting ways of doing it. And it may well be that if you know other kids with Duchenne, if you have friends with kids of around the same age, again, you can find some way of FaceTiming or Skyping, that you can do competitions. You can play games together. You can be on your therapy ball doing ball dancing on FaceTime with someone else. So that it may be that you have to find a lot of ways to get them into an idea that this is a positive, fun experience. But it's going to be really difficult to take the Xbox away if we overuse them at this point in time.
Okay. There is another question. We have a mum of a 4-year-old, and she said, my 4-year-old spends most of his time playing on the floor with his figures or toys or cars, hunched over and in an inverted W position. Countless reminders have failed to correct his sitting position. Do you have any tips, please?
Oh, W sitting is such a big argument. Okay, there is a lot of thought about W sitting, and there are those of us who actually don't think it is the worst thing in the world. So there you are. Okay. I am one of the advocates of, I would rather a child was sitting W than cross-legged. And I know that sounds crazy, but I will explain if I can on my young lady Rosie, who is here beside me. This is Rosie. And yes, Rosie has tape on her knee, I agree, but we won't be talking about taping today. Okay, now, if I am sitting W, the people will say that I will damage my hips. I W sat until I was 9 years old, and I did not damage my hips. And many people I know W sit and do not damage their hips. The only children who will seriously damage their hips if they W sit are those children who cannot get in and out of W sitting, who somehow get themselves there and get stuck there for hours. The most important thing about W sitting is that you change position every so often, and there are ways of doing it, and I will show you that. The only problem is I have my iPad on my box, which probably wasn't a good idea, so I might have to do some jiggling and you may see some strange things. Now, why do I say that about cross-legged sitting? And I will show you if I can. This is cross-legged sitting. The reason that cross-legged is horrible, and I don't think I can do it on monkeys too little, is because when you sit cross-legged, one of the things we don't like about cross-legged sitting is it squashes your feet inwards. You are in a very bent position, but also it encourages tightness of the iliotibial band. Now, when we talk about stretches next time, then we will go into this in more detail, but the iliotibial band is literally a fibrous band that goes from the outside of the hip down the outside of the leg to the outside of the knee. That is not a muscle. It is fiber. It is tough. And for all those people who spend hours stretching it, I have given up. I gave up a long time ago because I don't think you can stretch a piece of rope. You need to stretch the muscles around that piece of rope. That is a different thing, and we can talk about that with stretches. But when you sit with your legs out, as in cross-legged, then you encourage that bad ITB position. And it is not something I particularly like. Now, I have a lovely plastic box that's a bit, that is a sort of Tupperware style box that also looks a bit like a washing up bowl. And one of the things that we advocate, and I'm going to move this, but I'm going to have to find something to prop up my iPad. Let me see if this box will work. Might just about work. Okay, so I have a box here, which is a Tupperware box. Whoopsie, I'm having to do some jiggling here. There we go. This is just a Tupperware box. It's got all my little tricks in it. You can use a washing up bowl if you don't have something this big. And what we would encourage is the children to sit with their legs out and the box in here. So that what you have got is that their toys are in the box, their legs are out straight. The position that we like is long sitting. So long sitting, which we think is the best position, is literally sitting with your legs out almost straight. They can roll out a little bit, but ideally you have feet and knees turned up towards the ceiling. Doesn't matter how far apart. What we don't want is them rolled out, and what we don't want them is crossed where you will squash your feet. So out, knees and feet facing the ceiling. So if you have a box in between your legs, that is one way of doing it. Another way that could help to stop W sitting, not that I'm a big advocate of stopping it, but if you're worried about it, or your physio's nagging you, or grandma's nagging you, then the other thing you can do is use a lap tray. Have the child sitting. If you want them sitting in long sitting, if you have tight hamstrings, and don't start me on that because we'll talk about that again in a fortnight, but have them sitting with their back supported against a settee, against a big pillow or cushion or something. Have them with their back supported, because that's another way that you will get them out of W sitting, because one of the reasons they do it is it makes it easier to get their weight forward. So have them well supported and put a lap tray on their lap. And the beauty of a lap tray is it holds your legs, and you can play on it, put your figures on it, do all the things you want to do on your lap tray. The ones with a nice edge is better, because then things don't roll off it. It's a great way of playing. Now, I know a lot of the boys with DMD, the little boys, get a little bit obsessed with having their things the way they like them. They don't like change. They like to put their figures in a particular way. Some of them will find a lap tray restrictive because they want to spread them out in a long line or whatever. The most important thing about the position your child sits in, stands in, whatever, is that they change it regularly. So if you W sits 20 minutes, get them up, run around, move, do something different, then try and bring them back and persuade them to sit in a different position for a little while. Legs out, legs whatever. It's about changing position often rather than being in the same position all the time. So as I say, I'm not that bothered about W sitting. I'd still rather have W sitting as long as the kids can get into it and out of it by themselves. Same with side sitters. Side sitters are only bad if they always sit to the same side and sit there for ages and ages at a time. Get children moving 20 to 30 minutes maximum should they ever be in one position, and that includes on the Xbox. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Marion. We've got quite a few other questions actually. So the next question is, please can you give some hints and tips to what aerobic exercise they can do in their wheelchairs? This mum's son is 12 and in the late stage of losing mobility.
Okay, now strangely enough, we have done quite a lot of work looking, and I've tried to get hold of Joe Wicks, totally unsuccessfully, but we have looked at Pilates style exercises. Well, he doesn't do anything for children in wheelchairs, and we have a big problem with this because there's a lot of kids who need wheelchair exercises. And it's great to have PE style lessons, but they don't work for everybody. So if anybody can get hold of Joe Wicks, put him in touch with me because I need him to build up some wheelchair stuff. There is a lot you can do in a wheelchair. This is a surprise, I know, but there is. Okay, I'm just having a look around because I've lost some now. Oh, here it is. It's not a broom handle because I don't have a broom handle without a broom. This thing, it's sort of like a broom handle. Would you believe that is a knitting needle? Yeah, I know it's a little bit strange for a knitting needle, but it is a knitting needle. So we can work with this sort of thing. We can do up, we can do side to side, we can do forwards and backwards, we can twist. So we can work with a broom handle. We can do quite a lot of stuff. It's nice, it's symmetrical. You can also have a little bit of martial arts. Now, some of you may remember that a friend and I were doing martial arts work in wheelchairs. We were doing martial arts workshops. They were at Action Duchenne, and we did quite a lot of work. So if you can both get a broom handle, you can be doing that sort of thing, almost like stick fighting. You can have competitions. You can have an issue where you're trying to compete. You need to be able to reach the side. You may have balloons to poke just because I've got a pointy end, but you don't know. You think of games that you can do, but a broom handle is a nice stable way of playing in a wheelchair. You can reach up. Your weaker side can be helped by your stronger side. You can twist around, see how far you can get it behind you. If you haven't got a broom handle, think of something else that you could use, but something like that is a really nice thing to do for exercise. Okay, you can use balloons. Now, what I've been doing with some groups is Pilates style, and I've lost my balloon. Oh, it's over there. You can do balloon stuff. Similarly, reaching with balloons, pulling, pushing. You do need a little bit of help sometimes. You can stick it between your legs. Somebody's trying to pull it out. You can tuck it under your arm. Somebody's trying to push it out. Tuck it under the other arm. Somebody's trying to push it out. Hold it between your hands. Somebody's trying to push it out, pull it out, so that there is work you can do. To make it more aerobic, it needs to be a little bit faster, a little bit harder, a little bit more frenetic, so a little bit crazy. Go a bit crazy when you're doing it. So you've got balloons, you've got balls, you've got broom handles. Think of other stuff that you can do. You can get out of the wheelchair, sit, for those parents who've got shower chairs, get the shower chair in the garden when the weather's nice, and see if you can get water gun, and see if you can play a bit of target games with a water gun. So there's lots of things. You just have to have a little bit of imagination, little bit of thinking about it, but there's a lot you can do in a wheelchair. Interesting. One of the biggest problems we have with boys at that stage of difficulty walking and spending more time in a chair, what is so important to remember is that there are still a lot of muscles that work. This is the worst time for the boys to develop disuse atrophy. Disuse atrophy we all have. There is not one person watching this who does not have some disuse atrophy. And disuse atrophy is when your muscles shrink through lack of exercise. Now, if you don't believe that you've got disuse atrophy, you need to find an activity you have never done or not done for a long time. Do it for a good 10-15 minutes as hard as you can. And the next day or the day after, you will find your disuse atrophy. Go and do a ton of sit-ups, go and do a ton of squats, go and do some work and find your disuse atrophy. But why it happens so much at this stage for the boys is that the muscles in the legs that allow you to stand and walk have deteriorated to the point where you're struggling. But there are many other muscles in the hips, around the knees and feet, and particularly in the core and trunk that still work. But when you're sitting down, inactive, they are not doing anything, and they will get weaker. Now, one of the other things about school holidays that is the killer is it is the 6-week rule. Power that you have will disappear in 6 weeks. So if you do a lot of exercise, if you do regular exercise and you build up some stamina, if you build up the amount of activity you're doing and then stop, within 6 weeks, that is completely gone. So we know that it's not only a case of disuse atrophy that the boys get when they're struggling more to walk, but the boys who are sitting on an Xbox the whole time, who are now inactive where they used to be active at school, at after school clubs, at swimming, will get disuse atrophy. A lot of the weakness that will happen between now and September is not deterioration in their muscle condition. It doesn't happen that quickly unless you do damaging exercise. What will happen is they will get disuse atrophy, and that is a lot of what we're battling. Okay.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you so much. We have a question which actually I'm really interested to hear the answer to as well. For the paddling pool in the garden, a parent has asked, should they try to warm the water, or is cool water okay? And if warm water is the answer, I've got a little bit of a hack, Marion, that we currently use, which I'm very happy to share with everybody afterwards.
You don't want the water too cold. Cold water, if you think about a hydrotherapy pool, we're talking about between 31 and 33 degrees. Now that is all just under body temperature. In a normal swimming pool, you're probably talking about between 25 and 28 degrees. So ideally, you do not want cold water. Cold water only works for swollen ankles, to be honest. I would not advocate a cold swimming pool. If you did not heat your hot tub, how keen would you be to get in it, is the answer to that one. I would certainly not want to sit in cold water. It should be probably around 25 degrees minimum. So can we have your hack about how to keep it warm?
You can.
Unless you have a paddling pool with solar panels.
No, but that would be a good upgrade. No, if you get the garden hose, it's really just a garden hose, and an attachment on the end that actually attaches to your shower hose, whether it's a power shower or fed from your household boiler or whatever. You can actually pump the water that you would use in a bath or a shower into the paddling pool. And I can't take any responsibility for that because that was my other half's brilliant idea, and it works.
Now that's really interesting, but I certainly would not go into a cold pool. It's fine if you're just standing and jumping in it, but not for sitting in, not for doing a lot of activity in. As I say, running around in it. We have a pool, a paddling pool in our garden. Actually, we bought it for the dog, not for us, because in the summer that's where we try and scrub the smell out. And I'm quite happy to stick my feet in it, but I wouldn't want to go any deeper. And I'm a lady who was brought up in the northeast of England, have spent many, many years freezing my feet and lots of other parts in the North Sea. So I know what cold water is about. I certainly wouldn't advocate really cold water for anybody. I don't think that's fair. That's not exercise, that's torture.
I agree. So we have another question. So my lad keeps wanting to turn at night on his back, then on his side, keeping me up all night, and the parents finding it really hard to cope with it. He says that he feels uncomfortable. That's the child that feels uncomfortable.
Okay, now the problem is, what is uncomfortable? Is the bed uncomfortable, or is he uncomfortable? The frequent turning in bed is not normal in small children. It's much more a problem of older teenagers. So the question has to be, why is he doing it? Is he an older young man who needs some extra support? This is an occupational therapy question. You need to get your OT involved. You may even need to change the mattress and see what you can do with that. Now, I am sure there are people who have a much better knowledge of all the different mattresses than I do. I know a lot of our kids do end up being turned frequently at night, but there are issues that need to be addressed with his frequent turning, because this often goes with poor sleep, and it's a bit chicken and egg. Do they wake up because they're uncomfortable, or do they wake up for other reasons and think that they're uncomfortable because they've woken up? So we have to, it's a difficult question to answer without knowing the age of the child, but also it's something that needs to be addressed possibly by an OT to look at the child's sleeping position. If you have older boys who are having this difficulty, very often they need support at night in bed. It can be what we call a T-roll. It can be E-rolls. It can be the way their legs are. I'm not a big advocate of sleep systems. The reason I don't like sleep systems is if you do have to turn the children at night, you have to change the sleep system. There are better ways of positioning the kids in supports that are not sleep systems, much easier to use. But a child who's waking frequently, who's young, this is unusual and maybe a sleep issue rather than a Duchenne issue. And there may be other reasons why they're waking at night. So if they're fully ambulant and generally quite active, this is a sleep issue, not a Duchenne issue. Older teenage boys do require turning at night, but we still need to find out why they're waking up. That can be sleep hypoventilation, and again, that would need investigating. But there is often more to it than simple needs a lot of turning at night, and that needs a little bit more exploration.
Marion, the parent said that it's that their child is 12 years of age, and he is saying that he feels uncomfortable and that his legs hurt.
Then this is an OT issue. You need to get hold of your OT. You need to find a way of making those legs more comfortable. There are things that you can use. As I said, it may be that he has tightness that's pulling his hips into one direction or another. We do tend to find that boys with tight ITBs can have great difficulty in getting comfortable at night, because their ITBs can pull their hips into positions that are uncomfortable. So you definitely need to get hold of your OT and find some sort of sleep system, not a sleep system, a total sleep system. There's a company called Matchett Supports, MATCHETT, I think, Matchett, who make a lot of things for in bed at night and for supporting legs and bodies, and that may be something your OT needs to look into.
Thanks, Marion. No more questions so far, but everybody please keep the questions coming.
Okay, let's move on then to some shoulder, arms, and particularly hands. Now, one of the difficulties with shoulders is they're quite mobile and people think that they don't need all that exercise. And actually, there are several ways of getting good exercise for shoulders, and one of them is weight bearing through your arms. Now, I know we're not expecting the kids to crawl, but there are games that you can play sitting on the floor. Twister is a lovely game if the boys have got enough power to support themselves, and if very enthusiastic brothers and sisters end up sitting on them, that they're not going to get squashed. So Twister is a nice game to play, but you have to be a little bit cautious. There are things like crab football, a little bit more difficult. There are other activities that you can play on all fours, and those are weight bearing through the arms is a really good way of getting exercise for the shoulders. But there are other things that you can do. As we said, there are other things with the broom handles. It's really useful to think shoulders at a relatively early age, because once you're on your feet, again, with no swimming, there is very little that a lot of children end up doing for shoulder exercise. Swimming is obviously one of the best, but even when you get to horse riding, when you get to cycling, we forget the shoulders. If you can, a basketball hoop is a lovely way of exercising the arms. It's a great way of getting out into the garden, so that it may be that that's the thing we should be looking at on Amazon, on eBay, is getting a basketball hoop or something. It doesn't have to be. It could just be any sort of target games where you're throwing balls down the garden, big balls, little balls, into buckets, wherever. Get those arms moving. Ideally, relatively big. It doesn't have to be a heavy ball. It can be those nice inflatable balls. Lots and lots of arm work, shoulders. Don't forget shoulders, please, because when the boys start struggling more, they use their arms more. They use their arms more to get up off the floor. They use their arms more to get up out of a chair. You need to keep those shoulders strong for when your legs start getting weaker. Please don't forget shoulders. It's a very common one that people forget to exercise. Elbows. A lot of elbow work is elbows bent. Now, one of the things about elbows is people assume that because the boys, when they start getting older, will get tight at the elbows, that they have a nice strong biceps. And what is biceps? It's that big muscle here that daddies love showing off. It's this one here. Your nice big biceps is getting tight. No, it's not. Biceps is actually relatively weak in many neuromuscular conditions. This is not a strong muscle. It's not biceps that's getting tight and weak. Biceps is weak. The strong muscle, if you can see it, is this one here. This muscle is brachioradialis. This is what makes the elbow tight. And the problem with brachioradialis, and I'm sorry for the great long name, but the problem that we have with brachioradialis, it's hard to show you, I'll need to move back a bit, is that brachioradialis does two movements. It bends the elbow and it turns the hand over. That is the strong movement, not this biceps here that daddies like showing off. Brachioradialis, it goes across the elbow as biceps does, but it also twists the arm. And this is where we get this tightness of the hand into palm down. That is the strong muscle. So what we need to do is we need to work that hand, palm up, elbow out. Palm up, elbow out. Really, really important activity. Oh, I've got so many bits and pieces here. I've lost what I'm looking for. Right. No, can't find it. Okay, so what games can we play hand up? One of the things that children don't tend to do so much these days, turn the pages of a book. They have stopped reading, and that is a big problem, because one of the things about turning the pages of a book is it's this. Now everything is this, swipe, 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 turn, turn, turn. We need to get those hands up. What is the other game that we can play? Let me just have a look, see if I can find it. Woo. Aha! Got it. This. Get your packs of cards out, parents. Turning cards over is a lovely, lovely game for turning the hand over. Get the cards out. Teach them card tricks, teach them card games. There are so many card games. What's the lovely one? I think all New Zealanders know it. It's probably Chase the Ace. There are some great card games, great fun things. Little ones can play card games. Everybody loves Snap at the age of 4. Turning your hand over. There is another nice arm game for some of the older boys. Arm wrestling is everything we don't want. So if you want to arm wrestle, do not arm wrestle in the normal position. But instead of doing hand to hand and arm wrestling, you do it back of the hand to back of the hand. So you're pushing outwards, which is exactly the movement you want. So little things like backwards arm wrestling, card games, turning over the pages of a book. When you next go to Sainsbury's, get a couple of Argos catalogues and play the game where you have to race to find a page or a piece of something or look something up. There's another game you can play and have a race. And then what you do is you have to be a little bit careful about not saying, okay, well, you can have the thing that's on page XYZ if you beat me to get there. So lots of games where you're turning things over, because basically Xbox is sort of halfway, but most things, keyboards are palm down. And one of the things that we do advocate for arms and hands is musical instruments. And of course, again, piano, it's all palm down. Until somebody invents a piano that's upside down and you're playing like this, which might be a nice idea if anybody's out there, want to turn your keyboard upside down and play upside down, that basically most of the things that we do are palm down. That is because that is our strong, effective movement. In 30 plus years, I have once met a young man who got stuck palm up, which actually made his life very difficult, because if you can imagine, if you're using phones, whatever, to actually have your hands this way up is much more difficult. But we don't want to get stuck in this position. And the other thing that gets tight is finger flexors. Now, some of the children have tight fingers from very young. And again, we're talking about stretchers next week. But one of the problems is then they can't open their hand to weight bear on their hand. So we need to do games that involve stretching fingers. So what games can we play? What exercises can we do? And one of the things, if you want to weight bear, is you can do hand painting, you can do Play-Doh and put hands, and squash is another way of getting exercise for your fingers and working those fingers. Another thing that we can get the boys doing, some of them will and some of them won't, get them in the kitchen. You want to do some nice arm work, then it's time, if you can get hold of flour. A lot of people are saying that they can't get hold of flour because everybody's baking at home. Bake, dough, bread. It's great playing Play-Doh when you're 6 or 7 maximum, but you know, teenagers, older boys don't want to do it. Get them baking the bread, get them making biscuits, get them rolling out dough, get them working in the kitchen. There is, any lady will tell you, there is a lot of arm work in peeling carrots and peeling potatoes. So if the kids want to eat, they had better get in the kitchen and start helping to prepare food, because this again is lovely, lovely arm exercise. Toss pancakes. Don't get such a heavy pan that you can't make them. Nobody says Pancake Tuesday only has to be on Pancake Tuesday. Go and toss a pancake. Great exercise. There is all sorts of things you can do in the kitchen that can be exercise. Any more questions?
Yes, Marion, lots. Also delighted to hear that pancakes are for every day. So we have a question from a mum. At what age would you recommend night splints? One PT told me the sooner the better. My son is 4 years old.
Okay, I have one somewhere. Did I bring it with me? The issue about night splints is there is no age to start night splints. The sooner the better is the right idea. And the reason is we know that if you lose movement at the ankle, then you're possibly going to find it really difficult to get it back again. But if you don't lose it, then there's no problem. So the ankle, let me bring Ike back. Okay, let's get Ike's foot up here. Oh, let's see, that's better. Okay, the foot should come to around 20 degrees in the normal situation. And I say around 20 degrees because not everybody's does. If you are hypermobile, and that is going to take up quite a little bit of talk, so we'll leave it till next week to joint when we're talking about exercise, when we're talking about stretches and contractures. The usual is 20 degrees, so you're 20 degrees from straight. So that is 0, that is plus 20 degrees, and that's around normal. And I say around because I know my ankles have always been tight all my life, and I can only manage about 10, which is there. And it makes squatting harder. It does make life more difficult. When I'm doing my Pilates, I know there are things I can't do because my ankles don't go up. And that's my normal. It's not because I have contractures. That is my normal, around 10 to 15 degrees. But the normal, the usual is 20 degrees. Most children have that range. It's very, very rare, but not unheard of in Duchenne, that some small children cannot get to that 90 degree or 0 position. And very occasionally we have met boys 4 or 5 years old who've already had ankle surgery before they found out they had Duchenne because they had got stuck on their tiptoes. So what we're trying to do with night splints is spend all night in bed like that. That is not there, we know, but it's not there either. And that is the normal foot position in bed at night. When you relax, your foot goes downwards. It always does. You don't relax with your foot up here, you relax with your foot down. The bed covers will pull the foot into that position. And if you were sleep on your tummy, which a few boys do, then you are forced into that foot down position. So the reason we get night splints is so that it can hold the foot in a nice position, a good mid position for as long as possible during the night. Now, as I say, if you have 20 degrees of movement, which is what we want, why wait until you've lost some movement before you get your night splints? So even if you've only lost 5 degrees, you've still lost it before you start with your night splints. So you may as well do it as young as possible, get them used to it as soon as possible, and start the night splints early before they have time to realize that it's something different. And the boys who start earlier very often are the ones who manage better. Now, if you can't manage your night splints, and I don't know if I thought I brought one. Yes, I have. Woo! I'm back. Night splints. Okay, now there are some boys who don't tolerate night splints. I have a night splint here. This is one of our night splints. What you will see is that it is not lined. It has padding on the inside and the outside where the bony bits are, but it is not lined at all. It is bare plastic. It has holes in the back, supposedly makes it cooler. I'm not convinced. It also has a little hole here in the bottom. That is not to let the sweat drip out, surprisingly enough. That is to check that the heel is right down. So that's what that little hole is for. And when they're in it, they can't feel it. So we either get them to wear a cotton sock or an old sock of daddy's with the toes cut out, because often what makes it too hot is having the toes covered as well. So you want to use something inside it, stockinette, tubular bandage stockinette that you would use to make them. They are custom made. They are set at that zero neutral position. Nice soft padding. This is neoprene. Some children are allergic to it. My honest comment is the nicer stuff, and it's on the ankle strap, is sheepskin. I'm not sure if that's synthetic or real, but it's much nicer than the neoprene stuff. And that is an unlined night splint as we like them. Lined night splints can get sweaty and smelly and fungally and disgusting, and a lot of boys, certainly in the summer, say they're too hot. So we like them custom made, unlined, but not everybody will supply that. That's a night splint. So at 4 years old, yes, it's probably worth starting him already.
Thanks, Marion. And along a similar kind of vein, but I will ask it anyway. A mum has said, our 5-year-old is always on his toes, and now we are at home all the time. It is constant. Should he wear shoes indoors to prevent this, even if only for a few hours?
Shoes don't always stop you walking on your toes. And the reason that shoes don't always stop you walking on your toes is because the mechanics of walking on your toes is not related to what's on your feet, but how strong your muscles are. Now, admittedly, there are some children who appear to walk less on their toes with shoes on, but that's partly because the shoe itself, the heel and the depth of the shoe masks just how far the kids are on their toes. Sometimes it's the weight of the shoes that help to bring the foot down, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not advocating heavy shoes. We like trainers better than anything else. We think they're the most appropriate shoes for the boys. But often the walking on the toes is much more related to the weakness and the mechanics of Duchenne than it is to the footwear. But if they are more stable in shoes, if their heel seems further down in shoes, then yes, put shoes on. Again, as I say, it may just be trainers. Some of the boys prefer to be in shoes anyway, some of them don't. But if that helps, yes, absolutely, put their shoes on during the day while they're at home.
Thanks, Marion. So the last question for this section that we have is, our 7-year-old likes jumping on our trampoline. However, he has recently been complaining of a sore back. Do you think this could be caused by the trampoline, and would you recommend that he not use it?
I'm afraid that whenever we get a new child with Duchenne at our unit, the first thing we say is no scooters, no trampolines. We do not like trampolines at all. Maximum the children should be on it is a few minutes. We say bouncy castles if they're going to a party. There are many, many reasons for not using trampolines, and the back pain may well be caused by the trampoline. I have had a parent tell me that 10 minutes on the trampoline for their child caused rhabdomyolysis. Parents will know what that is. It's when you get Coca-Cola coloured wee, and it is due to an increase in muscle enzyme. There are several reasons why trampolines are not good, and there are lots of reasons why all children should have supervision on a trampoline. One of the biggest problems we have with trampolines as physiotherapists is they're not toys. They are pieces of gymnastic equipment. And in the same way that you would not get a springboard or a box or other, asymmetrical bars or parallel bars. You wouldn't get them in your house and start using them as gym equipment, and yet people use trampolines as though they're toys. They're not. They are pieces of gym equipment. Now, one of the issues is that when you are bouncing, it seems as though it's quite benign, but actually it's having quite a negative effect on your feet, on your knees, on your hips, and possibly even on your spine. And the reason that it's negative is that firstly, when you are bouncing on the trampoline, you're tending to do everything foot down. So you spend a lot of time bouncing on your toes. You do not bounce on a flat foot. You do not bounce on your heel. You tend to push off a lot with your toes. So you're spending a lot of time toes down, which leads to more tightness of the ankles. The other problems that we have is stability around the joints. You have to think that it's thump, thump, thump. Now, we know vibration is good for the bones, but that doesn't always mean that it's good for the joints. And we had a trampoline. I was very strict with a trampoline. The kids were not allowed more than one at a time. But my daughter, who is a professional level tap dancer, almost had to give up due to knee pain. Now, she was strong and normal. She's ginger, but that can't be helped. But she was getting severe knee pain from using the trampoline. There is a lot of force going through your knees and your hips, and possibly in this case, your spine, that you are not controlling adequately. Falling onto your bottom or doing bounces onto your bottom, bounces onto your knees, is taking a lot of strain through the joints. So that is a big problem. The other thing is, while the bouncing seems quite benign and easy, boing, 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 there is quite a lot of work in it. It is eccentric muscle work in some cases, in some ways of bouncing, and it is quite a negative thing. We do not particularly like trampolines. The other thing you would have heard me said is we do not like scooters. And the reason we don't like scooters is because they are very asymmetrical. If there is one thing we want from exercise, it is symmetry, the same on both sides. We advocate all those things where you are using both sides. And scooters, you only ever stand on one leg and scoot with the other. It is very, very rare that a child will swap over. Now, I know a lot of parents say they use scooters because they can pull the child along, and very often they do, and that's how they use a scooter. But ideally, the ones that have two things to push so that both legs are working are better than the single stance scooter where you're only standing on one leg and scooting with the other. But there are scooters that are sort of like a cross between a standing bicycle and a scooter, which are much better.
They're called sliders, Marion.
Sliders. Well, I thought that was a little beef burger or a bacon burger that you got in a restaurant. Because there wasn't much meat and a lot of bun, but I learned something new then.
Thank you. So that's the end of the questions for this section. So thank you. I'll let you carry on with the next.
Okay, let's move on. Trunk and spine. There's a big debate about the core. Do we need to strengthen our core? Can we strengthen our core? And if we can't, what are we going to do about it? Your core is reasonably important for keeping your whole posture in nice alignment, but that doesn't mean to say that we're advocating tons and tons of sit-ups. We're not. The other problem that we have in muscular dystrophy and several of our neuromuscular conditions, if you have a weak core, so you've got no tummy muscles, you will take over with your hips. And that is a problem because that can lead to tightness here. So what you have is you have a really big muscle called rectus femoris, goes from the back of your pelvis all the way through down the front of your legs. So it comes from inside your pelvis across the front of your legs. This is the muscle that gets tight. We have 4- and 5-year-olds with tight hips. We will talk about this next time because this is one of the things that gets missed so often. We have small children with tight hips Rectus femoris is one of your strongest muscles, not quite as big as strong as your bum muscle, but very, very strong. And rectus femoris takes over from your tummy muscles, and that leads to quite a lot of hip tightness. So when we're trying to exercise the core, we have to make sure that we're not just working from the hip flexor muscles. One of the nice ways of doing exercises for core is actually on a therapy ball. But again, it's not a toy. It is a piece of equipment, and it needs to be the right size. It is no good. It is not one size fits all with a therapy ball. The other problem that you will have with therapy balls is that they tend to get picked up and thrown, and we have lots of brothers and sisters and all jumping over therapy balls and doing strange and stupid things like jumping off the settee onto therapy balls and jumping from therapy balls onto settees, and it can all get a little bit mad and dangerous. So we need a therapy ball that is the right height. You have to be able to sit on a therapy ball with your feet on the floor, not with your toes pointing down, because that sort of defeats the object. If you cannot find a therapy ball that is the right height, then the ideal thing to use would be a peanut therapy ball, which is peanut shaped, tends to be lower, and it may be that you can get the right size in a peanut ball. Now, unfortunately, with lockdown, we can't get there, but I have noticed now, I don't know where else they are. I know there is one in Uxbridge, because that's not so far from where I live. These big sports equipment shops, and they tend to have therapy balls in lots of different sizes. I have no idea what it's called. Somebody out there will. But you can get balls in different sizes, and you should be able to sit on it comfortably. And there are loads of things you can do on a therapy ball. Really, really good exercise. Although for the younger kids now, we are using peanuts almost exclusively rather than therapy balls. Therapy balls are for bigger kids. The other thing is, if you're struggling at all, be careful with the therapy ball, because it's very easy to fall off. But core work is lovely on a therapy ball. You can do lots of ball dancing. So you're sitting, put the music on and dance. It's one way of doing a lot of moving your core and your trunk without doing lots of jumping around and standing up. So if you get tired quickly, or if you find standing too awkward, then you could have a therapy ball. But make sure, if you do manage to fall off it, there are no coffee tables or glass cabinets or anything you're going to go smashing into. So you do need a bit of space with a therapy ball, ideally on a carpeted floor. We don't want tiles and stone floors, please, with a therapy ball. Not the place to fall off. We don't want any broken bones, because that's a big problem. Therapy balls and peanuts, we can do lots of nice things. You can do bridging. Sure, most of you know what bridging is. It's when you're lying on your back, knees bent up, and then you lift your bottom up, and that is bridging. Some people call it shoulder bridge, some people call it bridging, and that is feet on the floor, bottoms up. Some of the boys can do it, some of them can't. If they can't do it, it doesn't mean to say they can't try. What they can try is try bridging, and you can put something on their stomach, a balloon, a toy or something, and try and get them to lift it up in the air. Try and get them to bounce that balloon up in the air from their tummy, and that might just be enough to start getting that core moving, to start getting those bum cheek muscles working. We have got down to bum cheeks. And the reason I say that is because this is a big problem. When we are looking at activity, we're looking at walking, we're looking at strength, we're looking at exercise. One of the things we have to appreciate is where the strength and the weakness is. And a lot of the problem that we have is that the weakness is in the power muscles, the muscles that propel you, that get you up from the floor, that get you up the stairs, that get you running, and that is your butt, your gluteus maximus. Now, many people have heard me say that the reason that ladies have big butts is because Gluteus Maximus is the muscle that you use to pick things up off the floor. That is why ladies have big butts, because they spend so much time picking stuff up from the floor. Big butt. It's also the muscle that gets you running up and down the stairs. It's the muscle that helps get you up off the floor. It straightens your trunk. That is weak. We want to keep it as strong as possible, but that's not always possible. Sometimes by the time we meet the boys, they've got a diagnosis, they've already got some weakness here. That is where we get the tightness of the hips at the front. So we need to try where possible and work that butt. If it's weak, then we need to take over with these muscles here and these muscles here. Now we have 3 sets of gluteuses. Gluteus Maximus is your big butt muscle, Gluteus Medius, your middle-sized one, and Gluteus Minimus, your little one. And Gluteus Medius Minimus bring the legs out to the sides, but what they also do is they twist them in. So we have to be a little bit careful about doing those. Now, Gluteus Medius Minimus are the ones that will lift your leg up when you're lying on your side like that. So there are some activities and exercises you can do. This is one we call crocodiles, where you're opening your mouth like a crocodile, opening your legs like a crocodile's mouth. And the idea is you keep your legs up and you, mum or sister or brother or the cat jumps through there, or you throw balls through and you play games inside lying and crocodiles. If you cannot keep your leg up, then you can do that sort of thing in sitting, where you're doing out and in. And an interesting way of doing that is to use a chair or a stool, put your legs inside the legs and push out, and put them on the outside of the chair and push in. And that's a nice one for your hips. And that's quite a nice one for mum and dads too. It's great for toning your bum up. So there we are, there's an adult exercise as well. Excuse me, too much talking. And no, that is not alcohol. Nice idea, but it's not. It's coffee. Okay, so we need to work around this bum. Don't want to do too much hip flexion. This is the one to avoid, the ones that bend here, this rectus femoris. For the physios out there, do not work on these. Okay, the next muscle that is very strong generally is hamstring. Now, hamstring attaches to the bone in your bum. You're actually sitting on it. You have 2 bones at the bottom of your pelvis, and that's where your hamstrings attach. And hamstrings go from your bottom across your hip joints, across your knee joints. Footballers among you, we know where torn hamstrings are, and attach at the back of your knee. So in theory, they bend your knee up in that position. They can help to pull your hip up, but their main function is to bend the knee, and that is strong, and that's where we end up with knee tightness. Now, we all know about tight hamstrings, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because that all comes in stretching and contractures, but we don't stretch hamstrings. What we do is we try and avoid strengthening them. And again, we're looking at exercises that involve kicking, straightening the knee, straightening the leg, bringing those activities where you've got a straight knee. So we want lots of straight knee stuff. What's the nicest straight knee stuff? Kicking. The other thing that we like is the straight knee and the hip together, and the best activity for that is standing on one leg. Lots of work in standing on one leg, what we either call step standing, where you're standing on a step, where you're doing activities and games, where you're doing things like, one of the ones we really like You're standing up, you've got a bowl with marbles, bits of cotton wool balls, more cotton wool balls, pieces of paper, pencils. And what you're doing is you're standing, you may have to hold on, you can go back to your little thing. And what you're doing is you're picking the marbles up in your toes and you're putting them into the holes. Anything where you can invent games that involve standing on one leg, but don't forget to swap legs. Same with arms, same with everything you do, symmetrical. We need everything to be the same on both sides. The only positive about an Xbox is you're playing with both arms. But if, and here's another idea for the dad who can't get his son off the Xbox, take the chair away, at least make him do it standing up, do it with a stretch. That's for next time, but get him standing with his feet on a book, get his stretches doing at the same time he's using his Xbox. Once go on an Xbox, has to do it in standing, has to stand nicely. How's that for a compromise? At least it gets something positive out of it. But a lot of one-legged work, and that is not scooters. However, we need to do things, dribbling a ball, kicking at a target, those football target games, or just football, but make sure you swap legs. The activities that we like best are those that use both sides: swimming, horse riding, cycling, martial arts, anything that uses both sides. If you are getting to the point where those activities are becoming too difficult, then we are looking at gentler things. We like basketball. The hoop doesn't have to be so high. It can be one of those basketball hoops that comes down lower. We do quite like table tennis because although it's only one arm, it's a lightweight ball. You're not using a lot of power to do it, and you've got to do a lot of dancing around side to side, backstroke, backhand, whatever, so that you are, it's not like tennis where you've got to use a lot of power. If you're going to play racket sports, badminton, table tennis are much nicer than tennis or even squash. Not that we think that many of the boys will be playing those games. Some of the boys, certainly some of the older Becker boys, tend to like golf. Not sure why. I've never found golf terribly interesting, partly because the ball always disappears, particularly on the television. However, again, one of the big problems we have with golf is how asymmetrical it is. And that is something that you need to be aware of, that we need. I know there's a lot of walking between tees and there isn't that much where they're doing a lot of stuff, but do beware of very asymmetrical activity. Any questions?
So thank you so much, Marion. We do have a question. One of our mums has asked, how can I find out if my 4-year-old has tight hips or not?
Okay, it's quite easy. Hello, I think the dog's trying to get in. It's quite easy. Okay, I will. Yes, the dog is trying to get in. She's actually been quite quiet, which is quite remarkable. I'm just emptying my little box, and I will show you why I am emptying my box if I can make some space. Okay, so you have a bed or something. Let me just again change the angle of the iPad so I can show you. So you have a bed or a settee or something. You must put, what am I going to use? I think it's going to have to be Rosie again. Okay, they need to be over the edge of a bed. So what you have got is you've got the bed or the settee or whatever it is, and you have got them so that their hips are on the bed, but their legs are hanging down. And then it's one leg up, one leg down. Now, if the hips are tight, this leg will want to spring up. So what you're doing is you're taking this knee up, and you can see that automatically, she's very good as this doll, wants to come up. And what you're looking at is there some tightness? Is there some springiness? Or does this leg go down over the bed, over the settee quite easily? Really important. Now, the reason that we take this leg up is to flatten the arch in the spine. And that's really important. You can't just do it by hanging over and seeing if there's tightness. because if there is tightness, what you get is a bigger arch in the spine. So what you will get is the spine will just arch more to take away the tightness. So the pelvis comes around with the hip tightness. So you must be hanging over the edge of this bed. One leg up to flatten the pelvis, and see if the other one wants to go down, just flops down, or whether it starts swinging up in the air, and you can feel the tightness there. The other thing you might find is that when you take one leg up, the other leg wants to disappear out to the side, and that would suggest ITB tightness, and that needs to be controlled as well. But we will go more into that when we do stretches next time. Okay?
Thank you so much. That's amazing, Marion. We do have another question.
Yeah.
Which is better, going out for a walk or doing the exercises that you've suggested? Or both?
Both.
I thought you might say that. Thank you so much.
There is no better or worse. There is different. And everything has its place. Walking is important. Again, when you're in lockdown, if you don't do long walks, you will lose stamina. You will lose the ability to go for a walk. One of the things we have to remember is that lockdown will be gone. And then what? If you've only walked around the house, walked around the kitchen table, walked around the settee, walked around your bedroom, that is not a lot of walking. If you're used to walking half a mile to school, if you're used to walking long distances because you are a family who likes to walk, and you stop now for 3, 4 months, then you're going to find it pretty hard come whenever lockdown finishes to build that up again. You do need to keep that walking going. Walking is so important. It's good aerobic exercise. You have to keep going, but you need to do the other exercises as well, because when you're at school, when you're in a group, when you're doing PE, it's not just about walking, it's adding all these things from head to toe, as we've been saying.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Marion. That's all of our questions at the moment.
Okay, we have got down as far as knees. Now, equipment, weights, good, bad, the ugly. Generally, we don't use weights. The reason we don't use weights is because we believe, or it is supposed to be researched, that weights will cause damage if we overuse weights. That doesn't mean to say light weights can't be used, but we have to know that balance, and we cannot say that every boy's muscles are the same. So even if you had 2 8-year-olds who look pretty much the same build, both on the same amount of steroids, we couldn't say that giving weights to both of them would have the same effect on their muscles, because we know that there are different children have different effects. Otherwise, all the boys would go off their feet at the same age. If every boy with Duchenne had exactly the same muscles, then they would all lose ambulation on the same day. And that doesn't happen. So every boy is different. So we can't say that one can have weights and one can't. Admittedly, a lot of the work on weights has been done on animals. So we can't always say that this goes for humans. But what we do know is that over-exercising damages muscle. End of. There is no other way of saying it. Over-exercising. Now, most over-exercising is not what we've been talking about tonight. It is your trampolines. It is weights. It is overexertion. We're not talking about climbing mountains. We're not talking about really hard, tough exercise. Not on. It's not what we want. We don't want to try and build power. We know the power muscles are already the most damaged. There are children of 5 and 6 years old who, if you do an MRI of their muscles, if you look at their muscles, most of the muscle fibers are already damaged. And we do not need to increase that. What we need to do is maintain stamina, stretchability, reduce fatigability, and allow the boys to work their muscles as effectively as possible based around age, height, steroids, all the things that we know about power exercise muscle. We're not looking to build power, but we do use this stuff, TheraBand. We use it quite a lot, and the reason we use it is although it's resistance, it's not adding weight. And we like resistance. We like static muscle work. What is static muscle work? Imagine a broken down bus. Imagine you are pushing that bus all by yourself. You are trying to push a double-decker bus all on your own down the road or even up a hill. You will get absolutely nowhere. But if you push your very hardest, you will be doing an incredible amount of work. That is static muscle work. You're going nowhere, but you're still working hard. And some of the work that we do with this is quite static, so that you may not get very far, but you are still doing a lot of work. We like static muscle work. We do like the resistance on resistance bands. We like the fact that different colors are different weights, that this is much stretchier than this one. There are different companies, so that this blue is not the same as that blue because they're from different companies. This yellow is not the same as this. And in fact, this is much better for some of the older boys who are really struggling. This is cream. This is TheraBand, the original, and this is only available through TheraBand. This cream for the older boys who find that most resistance is too much work, you can use the TheraBand. The other nice thing about TheraBand, doesn't have to be the cream, is that you can use it to take the weight of the limbs in the older boys, because once you take the weight of the limb, the leg or the arm, if they can't lift it up, they can still move it if you take the weight. And that's really important. I'm sure that's something Marina will talk about, but that is a really good use of TheraBand. A lot of shops now sell TheraBand. Tiger will sell TheraBand. Everywhere you get your yoga and Pilates stuff will sell TheraBand. Amazon sell TheraBand. Doesn't have to be expensive. Doesn't have to be 1,000,000 meters. A couple of meters should be enough. Again, make sure you know what resistance. Different producers of these elastic bands have different colors. Usually the reds and the yellows are lighter. The blues, greens and blacks, greys are the tougher ones. You don't want the greys and the blacks. There really are a lot of resistance. Great for shoulders, but can be used anywhere in the body. Now, I have to tell you, so that you know, you can look up TheraBand, and TheraBand actually have their exercise booklet online, free. You can look up all of TheraBand's exercises and see them online. They are not the only exercises. If you look up TheraBand or elastic exercise band, there are tons and tons of exercises on the internet. Just remember though, please, we do not want to exercise these muscles at the front, the hip flexors. We do not want to exercise the hip flexors. Okay, so the two we do not want to exercise: knee flexors, hip flexors, and the last one we do not want to exercise, elbow flexors. So we don't want to be doing lots of pulling, lots of bending at the back of the leg, lots of bending thigh upwards. Those are the three we need to avoid. Everything else is brilliant. Those of you mums or even dads, but I'm sure it's more mums, who do yoga will know clam, where you're lying either on your back or on your side, bringing your knees apart. You can have the TheraBand at the ankles. You can have the TheraBand at your knees. Wonderful exercise for your hips. You can have TheraBand. You can be standing on it if you have a long piece, working your shoulders. We have the one we call the Archery one, where you have one arm forward, one arm back. Wonderful, wonderful shoulder exercise. Do not allow the little beasties to flick it at their brothers and sisters. Otherwise, you have to give one to them as well. Keep TheraBand away from your face and head. If it flicks at your face, it can be a nasty ping in the face. So please don't have it around the head and the face. Great for shoulders. Really lovely shoulder exercise. Great hip exercise. As I say, a lot of them are online. They're free and they're to be used. I am happy if people want to contact me through my Great Ormond Street email address to ask for any specific exercises for different age groups. As I say, we use a lot of peanut balls these days, but for the more active children, you don't need that. But there are lots of nice things you can do on a therapy ball for some of the bigger children, not the weaker boys. Obviously, we're looking for things for them. One of the big problems we have at the moment is that the nicest activity for the older boys is swimming. We don't say you have to swim. Again, swimming lengths up and down a pool is one of the most boring things you can do. Up, down, up, down, up, down. A swimming pool is not the most exciting thing in the world, but a lot of games to play in the water. Again, one of the things we like is running around in the water, but running forwards in the water is, again, exercising those hip flexors, the bits we don't want exercised. We say run backwards, run sideways, in and out of the water, sitting down in the water, getting up in the water. You can play ball games in the water, water aerobics, all nice activities you can do that doesn't have to be swimming. Okay, any last questions coming in?
That's it. I think we've gone through all the questions.
Lovely.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody, for all the fantastic questions. Are there any further ones before we move
Just
on?
up. Keel over. Had enough. If people think of questions, they want to bring them to the next session. The next session will be on stretches, but obviously you cannot separate stretches and exercises entirely, because as you're doing your stretches, you should be doing exercises as well. That's so important. So we're happy if there's questions you think of between now and 2 weeks' time, please bring them to that session. We can answer them as well.
Marion, thank you so much. Everyone's commenting saying thank you, how interesting, and all the tips. As always, we're so grateful to have you.
No, listen, one of the beauties, as I've always said, is that the only reason I know it is because of years and years of working with these boys. So mums, dads, you are the people who've taught us all we know. We've only done it with your help. We can only give it back with your help, and that's what it's all about.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. I will be sending out a feedback form tomorrow. Please do fill it in so it can help us to reach more families. And if you have any questions, please let us know, but hope to see you all in a fortnight. Thank you, everybody.